be shared to the OSSI website along with the slides themselves. I'll also send the slides out directly by email to anyone who has joined today so that you'll have them a little bit more quickly. If you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to send them in the question box, and I will get to them throughout the webinar or at the end. All right, let's get started. So by the end of this presentation, attendees will hopefully understand the purposes of the SOAR Act Academic Quality and Early Childhood Grants, or the Formula Combined Grants, and distinctions among their purposes, because they are two distinct programs. Also, attendees should be prepared to complete and submit a SOAR Formula Combined Consolidated application, including knowing what information should or could be gathered and prepared in advance, and then understand the basics of project budgeting and allowable expenses. All right, so our agenda today, we'll talk about the FY23 grant details. We'll cover the purpose of the SOAR formula grants, review the major components of the application, discuss application evaluation and the review process. I'll remind you of important dates and contacts, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. All right, so FY23 grant details. Allocations were published on the OSSI website under the FY23 resources section of the SOAR webpage. The link is here, and when I send out the slides, these links will work to direct you to the right place to find this allocations table. The applications are now, as of yesterday, available in EGMS. So you can also follow this link to begin actually opening up your application, and your allocation should be populated within that application as well. And this is just a snippet of the allocations table. You can find the complete allocations table at this link on the OSSI SOAR website. The award period for the academic quality and early childhood grants will be from the date of the award to September 30th, 2023. However, OSSI will allow for the reimbursement of pre-award costs to the extent that they would have been allowable if they were occurred after the date of the federal award, meaning the grant recipient incurs those pre-award costs at its own risk and will not be reimbursed if OSSI does not approve the recipient's application. So any of those pre-award costs must have been obligated no earlier than July 1st, 2022. And so thus the total award period or obligation period for this year's grant will be July 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. And that applies to both academic quality and early childhood grants. All right, so moving on to the purpose of the formula grants. Again, academic quality and early childhood are distinct programs. So the academic quality portion of the combined grants should support projects designed to have a direct impact on student achievement, either school-wide or for specific subgroups of students, depending on the needs assessment and the structure of your programming. The early childhood grant should be supplementary activities that support school readiness, including the development of literacy and mathematics school skills for early childhood students. Allowable uses. All costs must be supported by the needs assessment and be aligned with proposed grant activities. So if you are one of those grantees that has both academic quality and early childhood allocations, you'll want to be sure to treat the needs assessments and the proposed or aligned grant activities as distinct programs, meaning the needs assessment for the academic quality grant may not be the same as the needs assessment for the early childhood grant. Strategies funded by the grant should have a direct impact on student achievement and be supported by research and/or evidence. And you'll demonstrate that through the theory of action component in your application, which we'll get to in a moment. Some examples would be NWEA MAP software and data analysis support for teachers to improve data-driven instruction, or an extended day coordinator to provide training and support for staff to promote effective extended day programming. So these are just a couple of examples of strategies that could be funded by the grant that would have a direct impact on student achievement and would not be kind of indirect support to the school. For more examples of allowable uses, we do have an allowable uses document that is also linked here. It's on our main SOAR webpage under FY23 resources. All right, so let's discuss the application components. The application submission must be completed through EGMS. The deadline is 3 p.m. That's especially important. It will close at 3 p.m. exactly on Friday, January 20th, 2023. You're highly encouraged to submit early because, again, the application submit feature will be turned off at 3 p.m. Please contact your SOAR grant manager if you have questions or if you need assistance with the application in any way. Your SOAR grant manager, this link will take you to the allocations table where each LEA will have their SOAR grant manager and their contact information listed. It is a consolidated application because it combines both the academic quality and early childhood grants, which means that there are multiple sections within the application. There's a general section, and then there's a section for each of the two programs. You'll want to review the allocation table again to see which sections in the application your LEA should complete. So most of the LEAs participating in this webinar today will probably only be receiving academic quality funding. However, if you do have an early childhood allocation on this allocation table, you'll want to be sure to complete both parts of the application. If an LEA doesn't submit an application in EGMS by 3 p.m. on January 20th, the allocation will be forfeited and redistributed to other SOAR programs. So we do hold to this deadline very strictly. All right, so again, the combined or consolidated application will have 3 sections in a drop-down menu in the top right corner when you open up the application. The first section is called SOAR Formula Combined Consolidated, and that's generally your main application. So the tabs across the top of the page here mimic what you will see in that main application section all the way to the left, or the first tab that should open when you open the application is the overview tab. This is all content that you'll want to read through carefully, but will not be, there's nothing for you to enter in on that section. Next, you'll have contact information, so you'll want to be sure to complete all of the required fields for your local education agency. Supporting documentation tab, there is no supporting documentation required for the initial submission of the application, so feel free to disregard that tab. And then another thing to point out is just to be sure to agree to all of the assurances on the assurances tab within the main application section before saving or submitting your application, and it won't allow you to submit without reading and agreeing to those assurances. All right, so next, again, in that top right corner, the drop-down menu, if you have an academic quality allocation, you'll want to select the academic quality section. And there are 4 tabs under that section. There's the AQ application, which is your main application content, the project objectives and activities tab, which these project objectives and activities should align with the needs assessment and the project description on the previous tab. The budget tab, which has several sub-tabs for you to input specific planned expenditures for the academic quality grant specifically. And then there's a budget amendments tab. You'll want to leave this tab blank when submitting the original application, but you'll complete it when you're submitting any future subsequent application amendments. So going in a little deeper into the AQ application tab or your narrative section, there is a comprehensive needs assessment, which includes a checklist of quantitative and qualitative data sources that you might use to complete this needs assessment, and then a summary of the needs identified using those selected sources. From there, you'll use that needs assessment to complete your project description. It should align with the needs identified in the above section, and the strategies that you propose in that project description should have a direct impact on student achievement. Next, you'll have a theory of action statement. So this is your if, then, because statement. We'll talk more about this in a second, and it should be supported by research and or evidence. And then finally, you'll have a statement on equitable access and participation, where you'll describe how your public charter school will remove barriers to ensure equitable access and participation in grant-funded activities. So these sections are all covered in more detail, and instructions are more clear in the application itself. So feel free to go in today if you can and start to poke around in this narrative section. So a few tips for this narrative: be clear and concise. This will help to minimize the chances that we, as OSSE internal reviewers, have to send the application back to you for changes or for additional clarification. You'll definitely want to make sure to make a clear link between the data, the needs, the project, and the research-based strategies. So there should be a clear through line between each of the sections in this narrative, as well as the sections on the next tab, the project objective and activities. And then to cover the theory of action structure a little further, again, this is an if, then, because statement. So if we do X, then we will see X result because research or evidence shows X. And then there should always be a citation for any research or evidence that you are citing. So an example, classroom-based intervention will be provided by teachers and assistant teachers for RTI Tier 2. That's kind of a summary of the project. So the theory of action would be if you or we provide teachers with high quality ongoing training and support that includes in-class coaching and mentoring, then teachers will change and improve their teaching practices, resulting in stronger academic outcomes for students. Research supports that quality coaching for teachers and will strengthen cultural competence for teachers, results in stronger academic outcomes for students. And then there is a citation there. So this is generally the structure that your theory of action should follow. On the next tab, there are project objectives and activities. So previously, your SOAR grants, this work would have been completed via an attachment, and we've actually embedded it into the application for simplicity this year. So there is a project objective that should be SMART, or specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. This is the intended outcome of the project. And again, it should be linked clearly to improving student academic outcomes and should also align with the needs assessment and the project description on the previous tab. You must have at least one project objective for each of your allocations. So for academic quality, you must have at least one project objective. And for early childhood, you must also have at least one project objective. Then for project activities, you'll need at least 3 specific activities for each reporting period. Since this is a roughly 1-year grant, or about 15 months, there will be 2 semi-annual reporting periods. So you'll need a total of at least 3 specific activities. Or I'm sorry, 6 specific activities total over the 2 reporting periods. You'll also include anticipated completion dates, the month and year for each of those activities when you expect that they'll be completed. And then you'll identify what evidence of completion you'll have. So what documentation you would be able to provide to OSSE to demonstrate that the activity is completed. Obviously, since this is an application, you haven't completed the activities yet, you won't be attaching that evidence or that documentation, but you'll just be identifying the type of documentation that you plan to collect to document that the activity was completed. All right, so then the budget tab, again, there are several sub-tabs for each of the different program categories. You'll want to complete planned expenditures for the entire award period. So from that July 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. And you'll need to provide enough detail to determine that each cost is allowable, reasonable, and allocable to the SOAR grant. So each row should give enough detail to clearly link to allowable uses. For instance, the number of items to be purchased, like 400 iPads would be a specific example. The length of time and frequency of service. So for instance, weekly reading intervention, professional development, and then the time frame that staff is paid out of SOAR funds for those salaries and benefits. For example, 50% of the salary from October 1st through September 30th. So those are some examples of the type of specificity that we would be looking for in reviewing the budget. All right, and then for those LEAs that have an early childhood allocation, you'll want to navigate down again in the top right corner to the early childhood application section. You'll notice that it mimics almost exactly the academic quality allocation or application section, but these are distinct applications and distinct projects. So again, on the EC application tab, you'll have your main application content, project objective and activities, which should align with the needs assessment and project description on the previous tab. There's a separate budget tab for the early childhood grant, and then the budget amendments tab, which you should not complete with the original application. All right, application submission. To avoid technical issues, we highly suggest that you submit early and alert your program contact or your SOAR grant manager as soon as possible if you're experiencing any issues. So make sure to do the following: save all pages as you go. We also recommend that you draft your content or type up your different sections in a Word document or another place that can easily be saved and then copy and paste into the application. But you will want to make sure that if you are copying and pasting, that everything copies over correctly before submitting and fully, and nothing gets cut off due to word count. You'll also want to review each tab to ensure completeness and run the consistency check to lock the application. The consistency check feature actually runs through each of the required components of the application to ensure that they're all completed. And then finally, you'll submit the application to OSSI. Again, the submit button will become unavailable after 3 p.m. Eastern Time on January 20th, so please be sure to submit early. There are 2 tabs in the main application section that might be useful functions to you. One is the application history tab, which allows you to see all actions involving the application, so any dates of consistency checks, review by OSSI, approval by OSSI, and so forth. And then the application print tab is available if you need to get a PDF or hard copy of the application, particularly helpful prior to submitting once you've entered in all your content and you want to review it for any errors or typos. Please note that EGMS only generates PDFs once per hour. So if you request via the application print tab a PDF, it will generate at the top of the next hour. So if I generated one right now, I would see it pop up as a link to download the PDF at 2 p.m. So just build in extra time if that's something that you're going to do prior to submitting. All right, so application evaluation. This application is a formula application, meaning it's not a competitive or discretionary grant, and that means it's reviewed via an OSSI internal review process. This also means that if the application is incomplete or needs additional clarification in any way, we can send it back to you. However, we do prefer to have a complete application submitted the first time around. Applications are reviewed on a standard checklist to ensure the quality of proposed projects, and the OSSI internal reviewers will determine whether enough detail is provided to ensure that expenditures are reasonable, necessary, and appropriate. If any revisions are needed, you'll be given an opportunity to make necessary changes in order to receive approval. But again, it is our expectation that a full, complete an approvable application is submitted by the initial deadline. If revisions are needed, we will provide you with a timeline. Usually that turnaround is pretty quick so that we can get all of the applications approved within a reasonable period of time. And important dates and contacts. So again, the application submission deadline is 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, January 20th. And the award period for both grants begins, or the obligation period begins on July 1st, or began on July 1st, and will end next September 30th, 2023. Again, if an LEA does not submit an application in EGMS by 3 p.m. on January 20th, the allocation will be forfeited and redistributed to other SOAR programs. So this is a hard deadline. And finally, we'll leave you with some contact information for Marie and Stacy, who are the primary SOAR program contacts. You can, again, identify who your program contact is by reviewing the allocations table on the SOAR webpage. Be sure you're looking at the FY23 allocations table. You can also reach out to me if you have any questions about the program. And finally, there's an EGMS help desk, email and phone number if you're having any technical issues in the system with your application. So please do not hesitate to reach out, share a screenshot with the email address, or give them a call if you're having any technical issues. And you can always reach out to your program contact or to me for support if needed. All right, so Q&A, I saw a couple questions come through. The first is, will you be providing a planning tool for this grant? We don't have a planning tool this year. We do have the allowable uses document, and then this recording will be shared to the website. Another question, is there still a performance agreement, or will this information now all be included in the application? That's a great question. No, we do not have a performance agreement for the SOAR grant this year. So please, again, read through all of that information in the application, specifically in that overview tab and the award administration tab, because the information that you are kind of signing off in submitting the application is similar to the information you would see in a signed performance agreement and is still binding upon approval of the application. When will the reporting deadlines for the FY23 grants be released or shared? So those will be released in a post-award webinar after the applications have been approved in this early spring. But I can share at this time that we expect the reporting deadlines to be the same as they were last year. So it would be May 15th and November 15th. And then, are we allowed to apply for SOAR academic quality funds for the same project we applied for last year? Yes, just you would need to ensure that the needs assessment still supports that project as something that the LEA needs. So I just ran through all of those questions quickly. If any more come through, please feel free to stay on the line. Otherwise, you can jump off when you are done. Another question I saw, will the SR3 equivalent be added to this grant when we submit a closeout report? That's another great question. So no, if you had an SR3 equivalent grant under your FY22 combined consolidated grant, there will actually be a separate continuation application for that part. So again, this only applies to LEAs that had SR3 equivalent funding that can be carried over into FY23. The previous year academic quality and early childhood grants did end on September 30th, 2022, whereas the SR3 equivalent can be carried over into FY23, and you'll receive more information about a continuation application for that component specifically. So no, it will not be added into this application. The slide deck will be shared. I'll email it directly to today's attendees, and it'll also be posted on the website along with the recording. And there will be a final report in addition to the second semi-annual report that will all be included in the same reporting template, similar to the reporting template for the FY22 SOAR Formula Combined Consolidated grant. Another great question. If we submit on January 20th and OSSI sends back for revisions, will we lose the allocation? No, you won't lose the allocation, but we will give you a specific timeline to turn around any of those changes. So while right now you have about 2 months to complete your application, if we send it back for revisions after January 20th, we'll probably only give you a few days to turn those changes around. But no, you won't lose the allocation if we send it back for revisions. All right, I don't see any other questions coming in. So again, thank you for joining today. If you have any other questions, please feel free to send me an email or reach out to your program contact. One other question that did come in, what is the earliest that an application could be approved? We will review these on a somewhat rolling basis prior to the 20th. So if you get it in very early, we will do our best to review typically within about 2 or 3 weeks. After the application deadline, it may take us slightly longer just because of the volume of applications that come in. All right, thank you so much for joining, and I will have the recording and slides posted on the website and also sent out to all attendees today as soon as possible. Thanks and have a great afternoon.